From the Emperor's return and an Imperium further divided by civil war to the circumstances surrounding particular Primarch's return in 40k, so many of you come up with really interesting lore theories in the comments of our videos. Considering the large quantity of new lore we're treated with these days, some of these comments are quite insightful and may just come to pass. Just quickly, I apologise if my voice sounds a bit off. I'm not well at the moment, but hopefully it doesn't interfere too much with the quality of the video. Now, because these are general conversational points and the comments are there for everyone to see, I'm going to show or mention everyone's usernames. These are not my ideas or points after all, so I feel people should know where they came from. The Emperor of Mankind has existed in a state of permanent, unfathomable suffering for almost 10 millennia. His being is nourished by devouring the souls of 1,000 psykers daily, their tortured essence, forming a wailing, tormented cyclone of soul noise before being absorbed within the greatest psyker ever to live. We received great feedback and engaging comments in our video, Will Games Workshop Kill the Emperor. I really love this one from Nigelius though. He says, his personal theory is that different aspects of the Emperor's psyche has assigned tasks to characters which contradict each other. He suggests the Emperor has tasked Cypher with slaying him, Russ with saving him, and Valdor with his subsequent plan, I guess the King in Yellow story arc from Dan Abnett's novels. I find this really interesting and it would make a lot of sense. The Emperor's fractured consciousness can be experienced firsthand through his dealings with Guilliman. So, for different segments of his being to be striving to cure or repair himself in different ways wouldn't just make sense, it would make for one hell of a novel, or at least the culmination of several. Another point may be that the Emperor can see a series of possible outcomes which are yet to come to fruition, depending upon actions and events influenced by others, so he isn't yet sure which method of curing or reawakening should be the final answer. Either way, I love this comment, Nigelius. It definitely provided food for thought and a hope that some really epic storylines could spring forth from the Emperor's recent presence in 40k novels, such as Dark Imperium, Son of the Forest, and Lord of the Fallen. I will just let you know that in the description, I'll link each of these videos for your easy reference. On the surface of Holy Terror itself, millions strong armies of Administratum serfs battle against each other, whilst far below their feet, blind creatures whose ancestors never left their cavernous depths of ancient cities howl at the edge of underground oceans. Let's look at this fun comment next before we dive into a massive Alpha Legion-esque conspiracy rant. Replying to our recent Terror video where we discussed the newest lore regarding the happenings on the surface of the cradle world of humanity, Michael Howell said that in his headcanon, the Potala Palace of the Dalai Lama is the foundations of the Imperial Palace. He even suggests the line of Tulkus who fulfill this role could be the beginnings of the order Malkador belonged to, the Sigillites. I hadn't seen the Potala Palace before reading this comment, but I can safely say I now see why Michael has found it fit to consider the foundation of the Imperial Palace. That is just amazing, and I could imagine something like this spanning the breadth of a continent. As for Michael's comment regarding the Sigillites and the line of Dalai Lamas, what's you guys' thoughts? If Black Library made that real-world link in the lore, I would find it interesting as mixing such established non-fiction, let alone about Tibetan Buddhism, with a futuristic sci-fi setting is pretty out there. Now this next one is pretty intense, so bear with me. This is by Ethan Matthews in reference to our Cypher on Terror video, which is the two-part video detailing the events of the new novel, Cypher, Lord of the Fallen. He speaks about Cypher here when he says, I think there's a 50-50 chance it's Alfarius. His focus on lies and truth is very much along the lines of I am Alfarius and this is a lie. However, he recalls specific memories of his fallen brothers before Caliban. On the same coin, he also has knowledge of pre-Crusade terror and the Imperial Palace that no one save for Primarchs or Custodes should have. Not to mention the fact that Alfarius and Omegon did this exact thing before. Anybody noticing a pattern, he says? Everything going on with the Emperor in the present is revolving around Malkador's shenanigans he set up without the Emperor's knowledge. The Inquisition birthed Saint Celestine, the Grey Knights have the Terminatus Decree, the Officio Assassinorum, who has Emperor knows what in their vaults, having only either Alfarius or Omegon turned traitor during the Horus Heresy, was necessary for the outcome we see today. Perhaps Malkador saw something the Emperor didn't. He wanted the Emperor to become a god, so he made him one. Cypher could also have more simply been an Alpha Legion plant from pre-Crusade, sent along with Luther back to Caliban. That would explain the way he talks like an Alpha Legionnaire, and why he knows so many details of the Officio Assassinorum, but also why he truly seems to care for his fallen brothers. He describes the side effects of pulling morphine, no consciousness can converge in one mind, how one lives through their disguise for years waiting for the right moment to strike. He basically draws parallels to himself by telling these seemingly random anecdotes. Ethan then drops a comment about Malcador and Lorgar. One last thing I forgot to mention, Malcador's unrequited love for Lorgar and his book. Malcador is probably the entire reason the modern Imperium forgot that a traitor wrote it and created the Inquisition to defend it. He was trying to stoke the flames of the Imperial cult even before the heresy. At the very least, I think he knew about the as above so below nature of the warp and the power of human belief in that realm. Maybe he thought the only way they could fight the ruinous powers was to have our own champion in the warp to play the great game. Now this is a lot to unpack, and I'd be very interested in hearing you guys' thoughts on Ethan's musings. As for me, pertaining to Cypher's true identity, personally I like the Causewayne theory. Really, if a Marine has existed for as long as Cypher has, and had the desire to, they could learn about the Assassinorum and their techniques, though I will admit that Ethan makes a very convincing argument for Alfarius or Omegon. As for his Malcador and Lorgar theory, this is certainly interesting, though I'm keen to know Ethan and your thoughts on why Malcador wouldn't vouch for the likes of Sindamin or Mercedes Olaton, or at least discreetly aid them or keep them safe from harm during the heresy, given they both vouched for the Emperor's godhood also. One for you guys from the US, Rumours of War states, I hope Cypher kills the Emperor so he can resurrect or ascend to godhood, thereby clearing the warp energy from the Milky Way, so I can swing by Terra and pick up a double-double from in and out. I'll just remind you guys, if you enjoy the content, hit that like button and subscribe. It does wonders for the channel. Thank you. Now, with the arrival of the largest Tyranid fleet in history engulfing the western approaches of the Segmentum Pacificus, the Imperium had to provide a curtain of worlds between the Tyranid advance and a corridor to Terra itself. This defensive effort is called the Sanctus Line. In our video, Tyranids Have Broken Through, we discussed just how High Fleet Leviathan has breached the Sanctus Line, meaning potentially bad news for Guilliman and anyone between Pacificus and Terra. Cumbernamm comments on this video, stating the Necron should intervene. He suggests this could be what the Silent King was talking about when he said the Blood Angels were needed for the battle to come, and that given this is the largest Tyranid invasion in history, it poses a massive risk to the species in which the Necrons wish for their own biotransference. Okay, Cumbernamm makes good points, but I do want to point out in the novel in which this alliance of sorts occurs, which I believe was word of the Silent King, even though this was tense and not just a happy-go-lucky team-up, to me it still screams heresy. In the grim dark of the far future, we do not make alliances with xenos filth. Even the Imperium's heroes are too bitter and xenophobic to team up with aliens, even if it does save the lives of Imperial citizens. I don't know, maybe it's the setting going a bit more mainstream, but I think occurrences like this in the lore go against decades of established hate and the xenophobic culture which is supposed to be prevalent throughout the Imperium, fueled by millennia of hate-filled dogma. Sorry, bit of a rant, but as I said, Cumbernamm makes good point as far as the lore really is concerned. Maybe again with Dante's locating the lion, the greatest monster slayer the Imperium has ever known, will race to face the Tyranid menace. In the novel, our video is based on Leviathan. It does state that if the Tyranids break through the Sanctus Line, then Guilliman would be forced to race to stop their approach to Terra, and that in doing so, Chaos forces would take further Imperial territories. Abe Froman, who it's always great to hear from, stated in reference to our Cypher on Terra novel, Cypher is Alfarius, who was Omegon, who was Alfarius, once Rogel killed his brother on Pluto. I'll move on while you think about that one for a moment. A while ago we released a short which was an extract from our Primarch return video. It was around the return of the Praetorian himself, most noble of loyalists, Rogel Dawn. Iris Goldleaf idea for Rogel's re-emergence back into the setting has to be one of the best ideas I've heard for a 40k novel before. He says, I subscribe to the idea of Dawn being held by Trazyn in the halls of Solemnus. Now hear me out, he says. A buddy cop escape novel series of Dawn and Clongrim escaping the kleptomaniac archivist, setting the return of the Praetorian and the surprise redemption of a traitor faction. and with the Sons of the Phoenix totally not being loyalist Emperor's children. Just imagine the sales of 2 different Fulgrim models, the book sales on a story of Clongrim versus Fulgrim. Mate, I hear you and I will buy that book in a heartbeat. About our video regarding how each Primarch could potentially return to the setting, Paddywop says, technically the Angel makes the most sense and will cause the most drama. His return further bolstering the faith in the Emperor, causing his powers to be felt across the galaxy. Guilliman is already wondering what makes a god, and if one can ascend to it. So the 3 of them internally fighting the instinct to decry his godhood, whilst witnessing the miracles for themselves. I definitely agree, mate, that Sanguinius' return out of all the loyalist Primarchs would cause the most upheaval and fervour across the Imperium. The faithful would be overcome with a zealous passion, potentially resulting in the Imperium hitting back against the massing darkness in the Imperium Nihilus. The Primarch's duality of mindset or belief wherein humanity's worship of the Emperor sickens them, while simultaneously witnessing Emperor-given miracles would just be intensified with Sanguinius' return. Likewise, I'm sure there are a significant amount of 40k fans who believe his return will subtract from the stakes his death imposes in the heresy. This was an awesome point raised by Paddywop. I'm sure we'll see the Primarch's atheistic views challenged again very soon, with or without their brother Sanguinius present. Another comment on the Primarch return video which explains a concern that the setting and non-imperial races shrink with each Primarch's return. This one is by Trust. He says, I actually like how Dawn has a fairly boring death. It illustrates that even these demigod beings can be brought low and can be overcome by the sheer numbers of a swarm of Chaos Marines. Otherwise, since Conrad Kurz foresaw Dawn being torn apart and was correct in all the other fates he predicted for his brothers, it would be odd if he was wrong with Dawn. But the biggest problem that grows with each Primarch's return is that it reduces the story more and more into Imperium are the good guy heroes against the evil villains of Chaos. The Primarchs are too genuinely good-natured and would try to rehabilitate and improve the Imperium unless Games Workshop undermines their characters and makes them start to embody the faults which have plagued the Imperium since their disappearance. And to everyone that isn't interested in Imperium or Chaos, all the Xenos players out there, they get increasingly pushed to the side. Eldar got the Triumvirate, and that looks to be it. Necron's got the Silent King, so that's cool I guess. I don't know if Tyranids are going to get a major character, or if it's just going to be the Winged Swarmlord and the Neuro Tyrant, but all these characters are just in the background of the lore. Their stories aren't really progressing anywhere since their introduction. And everyone else? Orcs, Tau, the recently returned Squats, they can't compete with multiple Primarchs. He says, as much as I enjoy the story of the setting progressing, with each Primarch's return, Games Workshop dips a little more into the spectacle and sales of a big, fancy new mini, and the game and setting becomes more about those things, and everything else becomes a little less relevant. So this is an interesting take on how returning Primarchs as main protagonists to the 40k timeline affect the feel of the overall narrative. I'm really happy that Trust had this thought and brought it up. I believe the writing involving Guilliman and the Lion's return so far does do a good job of giving you the sense of a Primarch lost and lacking direction, but I do tend to agree with Trust that they are quickly becoming typecast as the good guys, a dangerous direction for our beloved grimdark setting where there are no good guys as such. Even a Lion whose distrustful and suspicious personality during the heresy would see you rooting for him, while simultaneously becoming frustrated with his personality, has more or less vanished with his return in 40k. When it does pop up, he quickly counsels himself, and whilst it is enjoyable to see him grow positively as a person, I do agree with Trust's comment that it begins to typify him as a good guy. At the risk of ranting, I will add that in his novel, Lion, Son of the Forest, there were plenty of opportunities to see him not forgive particular fallen, and perhaps have more of a callous attitude towards beleaguered citizens he comes across, but it never happens. Let me know what you guys think about this one, it's really intriguing. I'm going to leave you with this last comment, which was made by Skinwalker Gang on our Will Games Workshop Kill the Emperor video. It's a doozy, but something I could really get behind. He says, I expect the Emperor to return as a warp entity, see the galaxy's worship of him, and go to Guilliman to destroy it, just like he did with Monarchia. This time Guilliman will refuse his father, employ the Lion as his reluctant war master under a different title, and fight his father's forces while attempting to redeem him in some way. This would make the Imperium the marketable good guys and eliminate the xenophobic elements of lore which would affect toy sales to children. I'm not so much about the marketable good guys and the PC approach to children, but I could really get behind the idea of a civil war between the Emperor and his 2 returned loyal sons. It'd be a massive help in blurring the lines between good and evil again. No doubt the 2 brothers would be faced with extreme moral dilemmas, and they would occasionally butt heads, but they would always come together to face the bigger threat or greater evil. I do like that. I know this wasn't our usual lore content, but there are way too many cool theories and comments to not talk about them with you all. As always, let me know your thoughts. I reply to all comments and really enjoy our conversations. Don't forget the videos we made reference to will all be linked in the description, so you can have a listen for yourself to see what we're talking about. Also within the description is a link to our Discord. Although it is quiet and a small server now, we'll soon be running hobby sessions through it, so we can all chat and chill while we slay the Grey, as well as play some games like Darktide or Space Marine 2 when that's released. It's also an excellent place to ask hobby or lore related questions. If you did enjoy the video, please consider subscribing, and keep in mind that liking, sharing and commenting are all excellent ways to make the YouTube algorithm share the video more. As always, remember that your support is much appreciated, and we do have an affiliate link for our Gap Games in the description of the video. Gap Games have up to 21% off Warhammer and other hobby goodies. It gives a portion of your purchase to Titan Wargaming, which we're extremely appreciative of. This is for Australia and New Zealand, but as we grow, I will look into other countries we can do this for, such as the UK, the US, Canada, as well as European countries, and perhaps the Philippines also. As always guys, thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next week. Take it easy and have a good one.